Legal recruiting is not ordinary hiring. A law firm is not simply looking for a resume. It may be looking for a partner with a portable book of business, an associate with the right training and work ethic, a practice group that strengthens a market, or a merger opportunity that changes the firm's future. At that level, talent decisions affect revenue, culture, client, relationships, succession planning and geography, and long-term firm strategy. Today, we are going to talk about legal search, partner placements, law firm mergers, client development, and how technology can support legal recruiting without replacing the judgment, discretion, and relationships that make legal search work. Welcome to another edition of the Smart Office Podcast. I am your host, Hippolyte Asa. I am an AI implementation engineer, and I help small businesses use practical AI systems to improve operations, client experience, and growth. Today, I am excited to welcome Andrew Wilcox of Wilcox Legal. Wilcox Legal is a legal search and client development consulting firm focused on strategic partner placements, associate recruiting, law firm mergers, succession planning, and law firm growth. Andrew has worked with law firms ranging from smaller firms to arm law level firms, helping with shareholder and associate placements, firms, mergers, business plans, and client development processes. Andrew, welcome to the Smart Office Podcast.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
I see what you're doing is very interesting with the Wilcox Legal because your work goes beyond simply placing attorneys. A lot of recruiting firms focus on filling roles, but your work really appears to sit at the forefront of legal talent, firm strategy, partner mobility, merger, succession, and a whole lot of client development. That is much more strategic conversation than just we need a lawyer for this opening. It also means your decisions can affect a law firm, revenue, practice strength, leadership continuity, and future market position. So I'm glad to really have you here. I think this conversation will really be valuable for managing partners, law firms, and a whole lot of people, attorneys, legal recruiters, and anybody interested in how talent in the legal system really works. So we're gonna talk about why legal recruitment is really different from general staffing and how partner placement group moves, succession planning, and merger affects law firm growth. And then we'll talk about how technology is really affecting recruitment and everything in between. So let's start with your story, Andrew. Before we even go into legal search and law firm, can you share your story? Like what led you into legal recruiting and client development consulting?
Yeah, I was back in, excuse me, good to be here. I was back in 2003. I was actually working as a representative with Westlaw in legal research and everything else. And I had an opportunity. A couple of firms came to me and said, you're out in the market. Do you know a good litigation associate? And I'm like, actually, I do over at this firm over here. And then I had another firm ask me if I knew a good environmental associate. I'm like, oh, actually, I do over at this firm. And about that time, I had a friend of ours who was in recruiting that said, you'd be great at this. You have a sales background and all that. And I thought, well, I've never really considered it. And I reached out to a woman that was down in Tampa that had been doing it for about 20 years. And she took me under her wing. And so it was sort of a strange confluence of events, but I was also building a house, having my first child. I thought if I'm ever going to start my own business, now's the time to do it. And I felt like I had a knack for it. I felt like I had the ability to listen to attorneys and also listen to firms and what their goals were and be able to broker those two things together. And in that listening, in those questions, I started forming really a passion for it. I enjoy working with attorneys. I enjoy working with people on their career goals. And really, I've enjoyed working with firms that are small firms all the way up to large firms, because when they're looking to bring somebody on, they really have to get that right, or else that could make ripple effects to their firm, depending on the size of it, for years to come.
Right.
So having a really good understanding of what their goals are, not only from a practice side, but what their culture is, what they're trying to accomplish for the next 5, 10, 15 years, and who the pieces of the puzzle that would help them to satisfy that. That's always been interesting to me. And I've been doing this now since 2003. I started out working with associates, and then I started working more with partners, as those associates that I've had originally worked with had become partners and were looking for other opportunities. And now I almost exclusively work with partners and with groups on their moves. It's just a lot more strategic in my experience. Right. When a law firm is looking to expand into a new market or a new practice area, or there's a practice area that's missing that they feel like could leverage what it is they're doing, working with law firms that mergers. So, they're looking to There may be a mid-sized firm or a regional firm or a statewide firm, and they're looking to plug into a larger firm's machine, but maybe they want to maintain their autonomy. They want to have the same cultural considerations. I work with them through that, and then succession planning. So maybe you have some attorneys that are 5, 10 years away, and there's a few of them that they jumped out of a big law firm 20 years earlier, and one's about to retire, one wants to go off counsel, and they really need to figure out, well, what does that look like for us moving forward? And I work with them on that. And then something really exciting, I work with law firms. It's a completely different, but I actually do wellness and mental health retreats with attorneys as well, with law firms, where we'll just get out in nature and we'll hike, and 5 or 10 miles, maybe around. Some of them are a little bit shorter, but in their towns where there's a sense of place. But I'm a big advocate on mental health when it comes to attorneys, and they're in the office all day.
That sounds good. So you've worked in legal search and consulting for many, many years. Let me say many years. How has the market really shifted or changed since you started? How has the market changed? Okay. Isn't that ironic that the tools for communications have improved, they've multiplied, but we still find it difficult to really communicate, get access to each other? Is that we have now so many ways to communicate, but now it's becoming more difficult. So we're going to talk about that. Now the shift from then now. So do you find was it easier then back then to really look for somebody like maybe networking, maybe the area was smaller. Was it easier then to network back then compared to now? Right. When a law firm or attorney hears the name Wilcox Legal, what do you want them to understand about your approach? When they hear that name, what do you want them to understand about how you operate, how you approach your approach? Can you describe a little bit how is the focus more on strategic fit, confidential, like a partner placement, how client development? What's your approach like when these potential law firms or attorneys hears them? Yeah. So let's talk about good fit. I know good fit is a term generally used by headhunters, everybody, or hiring terms. What makes a successful legal placement? Like when it comes about, is it the good fit or client fit? What aspect of it makes it a good fit to you? Like, do you have some specific areas, touch points? You really look at that key to making them a good fit?
What
Yeah.
makes for a good fit?
Right.
The book of business, are they a thought leader? But also because when they're going to talk to a law firm a lot of times is going to risk adjust or look at their numbers. And what I believe will separate an attorney is if they say, here's how I develop my book of business, and here are the types of clients that I go after, and here's whether that's through seminars or referrals or whatever. Could be 100 different ways that they network and prospect and all that, because I want them to explain how they develop their book of business. Because oftentimes, if there's a conflict and they have 50% of their business ends up having to stay behind, that law firm has to understand, okay, well, yes, but they know how to develop that business that may get lost. And they're explaining that to me on how they do that. So to me, it's somebody who's not only a thought leader and they run an elite practice, but they have a good idea of how they do what they do. And it's not just unconscious that, every year I just seem to get $1 million worth of business in, and I go to this seminar and I go to this conference, and out of that I get 5 new clients, and that's great. I just want to find out from them, how do they tell their story to their clients, and how do they develop their book of business? And then last, you get a feel for people in terms of just their general attitude. Every law firm has a no, well, I shouldn't say the word on here, but a no such and such policy. But that's what I try to figure out. Is this somebody that, are they going to work well and play well with others? Culturally, are they going to, have they made a bunch of moves? Every one of those moves that they've made is always somebody else's fault. After 2 or 3 moves, and well, it's the managing partner did this, or the firm didn't do this, or whatever. After 2 or 3 of those, it's usually that person's fault. If there was a fault, I like for them to own that. I look for a level of emotional intelligence that they'll say, you know what, this wasn't a good fit. I had to pivot and I had to go this direction, but here's what I'm looking for in a firm. But also somebody that, again, they're somebody that, you know what, when it gets stressful, and there's always going to be stress, they know how to manage that, and they know how to make other people thrive around that rather than being a negative in their office space for that.
Let's talk about resumes now, right? Like, what should law firms look for beyond a partner's resume or title? Let's say you have this resume, it's very good resume, very attractive resumes. They have a good title. So what do you look for beyond the resume?
Well, first of all, in that resume, I'm looking for how many moves that they've made. Again, is this somebody that's moving every 2 or 3 years? Because a law firm's going to ask me if this is somebody who's moved 4 times in the last 8, 10 years. They're going to want to find that out. So I need to know that. I also look for the details in a resume. So if it's a corporate partner, what type of corporate work are they doing? If it's a construction litigation or labor and employment, I'm looking for the details in that, because that to me is going to let me know what type of niche that they're in. Not just litigation partner, but are you doing construction? Are you doing labor and employment? Are you doing specific types of work? Are there certain codes that you work within? If you're doing administrative or regulatory, or if you're intellectual property, is there a specific guideline that you're working within that, what, if I make a move to another firm, that firm has to be able to support this type of regulation type of work. Those are the types of things I look for. And then the conversations that I have with them are around clients, and are there any conflicts? Or, if they're representing a client and they say, you know what, if this firm was on the other side of that, then it's not going to be a good fit. It's going to be a conflict there. And then I also ask them what their rates are. If it's an attorney that has, $400 or $500 an hour, and we're talking about firms that are going to make them go to $800, $900 an hour, or $1,000 an hour, well, they're probably going to lose their clients. There may be some wiggle room there, but if it's a big chasm there, then they're probably not going to be able to move that book of business. So those are the things I'm looking for: is what type of work, what type of background, and then, hey, are they doing things in the community? Are they well rounded? Are they just doing the seminars? Are they just doing the business stuff, or what do they do? Because to me, from a storytelling perspective, I think it just makes people more unique when they're, hey, you know what? I volunteer with World Central Kitchen, or once a month I do stuff with Team Rubicon, or I join this running team, or those things aren't business oriented so much as, yeah, but when you're away from the office, you're doing something, and then when you come back to the office, you actually are a fuller person for that, and you could share some things, and you could build that collegial environment in our office.
So Wilcox Legal also guides firms through mergers, right? From first
Yes.
conversation to integration. What makes law firm mergers so complex?
Well,
What
first
makes
of
it
all, the,
complex?
the
Yeah.
size, it depends on the size. It depends on what you're trying to merge. If you've got a person firm and they're trying to bring in 20 or 50 attorneys, they could oftentimes do that. But let's just use the example of your 1,000-person firm, and you've got a 20-person firm in Florida that you're trying to merge that in with. Well, first of all, is that a strong merger candidate? In other words, are most of the attorneys there generating, growing, building something that they could
Right. Wow, that's cool. That's nice. Yeah, I mean, that's a good analogy. I mean, letting our listeners understand how this works. Legal recruiting can be very, very complex. I mean, you have to consider a whole lot of things, holistic approach, not just one-sided approach. But you also mentioned something. You mentioned, right. There's something you mentioned at the beginning of the discussion. You said that you're equally involved with development, some sort. So also includes client development, right? Systems and training partners and associate on business development. Why is client development such an important part of legal talent strategy? Yeah, somebody like you are like a legal search consultant from someone who is simply sending lawyer profiles. You probably have really honed those skills and you're good at that. What is the separation? How can somebody go from just being a search consultant? Somebody who just searches and then and then somebody who searches, who says like somebody like you, who says searching consultant, and then from somebody just simply sending out lawyer profiles to
Yep.
take a look at this, take a look at this. What separates you from them?
I spend a lot of time getting to know people, and I think a few things that separate me is I oftentimes will play the long game. I mean, there every year there's probably a half a dozen attorneys that I have talked to for 10 to 15 years that I'm one that oftentimes has told them now is not the right time for you to make a move. There aren't many recruiters that do that. You know, it's again, I use a real estate analogy. Well, you're in the market to buy a house. You need to buy a house. You need to buy a house through me. That's
Right.
not the approach I take. I've been very successful, and I believe building a network in that I get to know people. I get to know about their family life. I get to know
Right.
about their triumphs and their tragedies, and that to me is the fun part of what I do. When I talk to somebody, and it's not the Michael Scott thing where I've got it on a piece of paper. A lot of times, weren't you at such and such a firm 10 years ago? And yeah, and you sent me, oh yeah, and we did. And we had a conversation about such and such. I spent so much time getting to know people and what is unique about them that I think that's different. It's not just sending me a resume and sending it off to somebody, but when I talk to a firm, I'm able to tell them, hey, this is what their story is. This is where they came
Right.
from 15 years ago. Did you know when they were in law school that they did this as a side job so that they could get through law school? They may not have gone to a top tier law school, but here's why this attorney is such a good fit for your firm, because this is where when your firm needs to count on somebody that has a extra something to them, this is that extra something to that attorney. And a lot of times that doesn't translate to a resume. That's their story. And I love stories. I love storytelling. And but I also like reading stories. And I think that as far as a consultant goes, I think that's what separates me. Is I spend the time and the effort to get to know people. I spend the time and the effort to get to know law firms and what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are. And hey, how do I make your firm better? How do I, if you're an attorney, if you were to make a move to a better situation, what would that look like to you? What do you need to help you with each day to work?
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Andrew, let's talk about Wilcox Legal, continuous supporting firms with legal search partners and placement mergers, right? Like, I want to find out, what are your priorities today, right now? Is there anything you're looking forward to if the next month, next 6 to 12 months went very well? What would be different for Wilcox Legal? Right, right. So let's talk about where you believe technology has been in the mix right now. Where do you believe AI can create the most practical value in legal search and law firm growth consulting? Like which areas do you think it's doing some good? We're going to talk about areas that is doing some bad and where the noise is coming from.
A technology that is staying on top of the trends that are coming. You're able to utilize AI to your advantage. Then the partners who grew up using books and paper and CD-ROMs and terms of connectors and all, they're going to look to you and say, how do we take that next step into the future? You're the one that's going to lead the charge. So that's my advice to the younger attorneys. And then really when it comes to AI and search, I got to tell you, I've done a lot of research on how to leverage those tools for myself. And I've run into a lot of dead ends because if you're using it to fill up LinkedIn, if you're using it to create content that's being put out there, you're dealing with attorneys who they're reading a lot of AI slop, for lack of a better term. And they even will find the words at different AI platforms will create answers and paragraphs and all that kind of stuff. And I think you lose credibility. Not to say you can't use it to build some content and get you 70% of the way there. To not use that, I think, is to deny where we're going. But if you're just saying, Claude, write me 500 words on such and such, I think people are just going to tune you out because there's just so much of that stuff that's out.
You mentioned about picking up the phone and calling people. Are there certain areas you could automate them and let AI take care of them? What areas would those? Yeah, if you were to look at your process, your workflow from the beginning to the end. Mhm.
But yeah, I think that's the issue is, yeah, in terms of transcription, in terms of being able to go into my database and read from my database and provide me with, hey, I'm looking for a litigation partner in such and such a city that has this specific work. being able to call for me, then great. Some of the organizational tools like for calendaring. Even if if I've got a partner that I'm working with in a specific city and I want to be able to find some additional information on if I may not be familiar with that city in some areas like Phoenix or Las Vegas, I may have a good partner there that I'll reach out on AI and say, okay, here's a person who has this type of background. What are some firms that may be a fit? So it may prompt my thoughts on that, or I didn't realize this firm just expanded into that market. Firm is in all these other markets around that, but they're not in that city. Maybe that's a good opportunity for me to go to that firm and say, hey, you're everywhere except for, and this happens a lot in the Southeast. You're everywhere except for Atlanta. You're everywhere except for Orlando. You're everywhere except for North Carolina. Are you all into those markets? And so sometimes I'll use AI to find that out, and if there's a conflict or something. But it is very manual. And I do a lot of things like the Elite Recruiter podcast and some of the other ones where it seems I'm doing, which is just pick up the phone. You're having a lot of phone calls. You're talking to a lot of people, and usually it's as old as time. But if you're controlling your production, if you're reaching out to enough people, if you're having enough conversations, it just seems like that productivity sort of takes care of itself. And it's more fun. I gotta tell you, the idea that I'm sleeping all day and all night while I have this army of chatbots that are reaching out to other bots and setting up
Yeah.
Zoom calls.
Yeah, there are certain areas in our community on our society that are really late to adopting technology. I think legal and
To summarize that, when you go through to the internet, you start going through to social media, you start going through to AI. Even attorneys back in 2018 or 19, when I was talking to them about making moves to remote law firms or this hybrid model, and they said I could never work out of a home office, never, 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 never in a million years. And then COVID came along, and everybody had to work from home. And so you had these attorneys that they hated that, and you had other attorneys that said they could never do it in a million years. That after 2 weeks, they said, "Oh, this is great. I could have my calls with people, I could text people." They get back with me just as quickly as they would if I had to go into an office. So a lot of people said, that's the only way I want to work now. So sometimes those changes are heaped upon you. And I think from a practice standpoint, a lot of the AI stuff is going to be heaped upon them. But from a recruiter standpoint, unless there's a magic bullet out there, I think at the end of the day, it's still a person business. I think it is still a conversationist. Yes, things are harder to reach people that you would like to have a conversation with, that you think that they may be really a good fit for an opportunity because there's so much noise and they're getting so many calls and emails of non-existent or opportunities that aren't good fits for them, and they all sound the same. So it's tough to get through that noise. But at the end of the day, attorneys are still making moves. And people still need to enhance their careers, and I hope to be that person or maintain being that person that, hey, you know what? I want to pick up the phone and talk to this guy and see if where my career is, if it matches up against the market, and am I in the right spot? Could I do better? If I could did better, for me to take a next step forward is that pain of making a move worth it now, or is it worth it making a move better off to make a move in 2 years or 3 years after I've done these things?
Thank you for joining me on this Smart Office podcast. I really appreciate everything you do. Your insights are really spot on. There are many things that are going on. Often mergers is something a lot of people don't know how complex they can be. And development is something that is really new and you're really in that space. I really want to give you that opportunity to talk to potential customers out there, people that may want to be your client that are good fit for you and candidates that may need your service. How can they reach you?
Yeah,
Which
if
area
they'd
do you
like to reach
operate?
out to me, my phone number is 850-274-7849. They can email me at andrew@wilcox-legal.com. My website is wilcox-legal.com. And then it's the same thing with LinkedIn. If they want to look me up under Andrew Wilcox on LinkedIn, I love to connect with people there. I have a podcast that's called The Lateral Lawyer Brief, where we get granular in terms of practice areas and ways that they may be able to enhance their practice. About 8-10 minutes each. So if they're driving to work, taking a lunch break or something, it's great for something like that. We'll get really granular with that. And I love to have a conversation with people. And I think the key thing is a conversation with me is confidential. If they say I'm not ready to make the move, I don't want my resume sent over, but I just want to find out how I stand or where I stand in the market possible. Oftentimes I tell people, yes, you are in the best position possible. But if they're not, I'd love to have that continued conversation with them, whether it be an immediate need or something that may be a good fit for them down the road.
Wow, that was good. I mean, you can reach out. You hear Andrew, or where you can reach Andrew on the website, phone number, LinkedIn, and the services that Andrew offers. Andrew, Lee, thank you very much for joining me on this podcast. I really appreciate it. Hope to talk to you once more. Thank you very much.
That sounds good. I hope to talk to you too.